Hello lovely people, welcome to another book chat where I talk about some books that I've read vaguely recently.
Dooby 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 doo. Dooby 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 Sophie Vlogs.
I have a couple of things to talk about, I'm just gonna dive into it. Starting with Undercover Princess by Connie Glynn. This is the first book of the Rosewood Chronicles. It follows, I've already forgotten your names. It follows Lottie Pumpkin, who is an ordinary girl who's always wanted to go to Rosewood High, is that it called? Rosewood College? Rosewood Hall, sorry. I've read a whole bunch of books since this. And she's there on a scholarship, and then Ellie Wolf, who is actually princess of this place, and it's like the final bit of normality she'll have before she's publicly announced, and then everyone knows who she is. They are roommates together. As this goes on, they decide that maybe Lottie could pretend to be the princess so that Ellie can have a normal time at school, and then shenanigans ensue. I picked this up because I like Connie Glynn. I'm subscribed to her YouTube channel. I find her very entertaining. She seems like a right laugh. And I just wanted something that was like a sweet, lovely read. Sometimes I want something that's like a little bit like, ooh, we're playing with some tropes, we're having a good time while we're doing it. And that really like satisfied that craving that I had. I wanted like a sweet, princessy read, and that's what this is. I enjoyed the friendship of this. I enjoyed the friendship that grew between like Lottie and Ellie. I still there's like a topic of like ships, and I don't know who I ship with anything because there were like a couple of threads going on, and I was like, who is the end game here? I don't know, but I've got some hopes. I also really enjoyed like exploring Rosewood Hall. I know that this is based on like Connie's own experiences at the boarding school she was in. This idea of having stories that take place at magical boarding schools is not a new one, but this was a nice exploration of it, and I enjoyed sort of the school world building and stuff. And by the time I also really enjoyed seeing where this went. It went to some interesting places. I think I probably would get the second book out of my library just to see what it's like. It was like a solid like 3 out of 5 star read for me. It was like perfectly enjoyable. I had a nice time doing it. I was suitably intrigued to see what was going to happen, and I liked the characters. At times, Lottie felt more fleshed out to me than characters like Ellie did. I didn't always get why. Like Ellie is like rebellious, but then like she doesn't really do a lot of rebellious things. But at the same time, like, it is geared towards, like, a slightly younger reader, so you don't really want to be, like, too out there. Sorry about all the noises. My boyfriend's in the shower. But yes, perfectly enjoyable. Had a nice time. Enjoyed the read. Would read the second one. After that is the Pendragon Chronicles, heroic fantasy from the time of King Arthur, edited by Mike Ashley. I don't know why my voice is going. I'm very sorry. We're just going to deal with this. This is a collection of short stories that are all fantasy retellings of the legend of King Arthur. One thing I really enjoyed about this is that, you know, Arthuriana as we know it is just built up from loads of different tales. This tradition that has been passed down, we sort of now have like the one narrative that we associate with it, but actually it is built up from loads of different narratives that contradict each other and stuff like this. So one thing I enjoyed about this is how each person, looking at what threads they picked up on, what characters are we exploring. You know, Arthurian romance as we know it is something that we associate with like a very like medieval, like chivalry, stuff like that, but a lot of these like original texts are from much further back, so some people decided to go down the complete like stereotypical medieval route, which is not a bad thing, it's fun to read. Other people like drew it back and were like, okay, if we posited it in this time, what would these narratives look like? Some of these focused on, like there are 3 stories in a row which all focus on Lynette and Gareth, and seeing how the character of Lynette was interpreted in each different one was really interesting. I think my favourite one was The King's Damosel by Vera Chapman, which was focusing on Lynette, and it was really giving Lynette a voice, and like, you know, these things which are typically male-dominated narratives, and then you like flip the focus and you look at a female character in them. That was really good. I also enjoyed Son of the Morning by Ian McDowell, which was looking at Mordred, and it was sort of early Mordred before Arthur realizes that Mordred is his son. That was good. So essentially, like, I enjoyed, there was none of these stories which I thought were bad. There were stories that I enjoyed more than others. But throughout it all, it was just interesting to see loads of different interpretations. This was published, I think, in the early 80s, so it's not like a up-to-date collection of fantasy retellings of King Arthur's stories, but it was still enjoyable to like dip in and have this real range. Some of them are like, one of them's just retelling a story from the Mabinogion, other ones are like entirely new tales, one of them is like positing this story as like a detective murder mystery, all of these things. So it was really fun. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I think with all of these collections, usually, unless they're brilliant, they tend to average out at about 3 out of 5 stars for me, because a lot of the time, like, there's ones you like, there's ones you don't think are so good. But I have enjoyed reading it. I haven't read any Arthuriana for ages. I want to get back into reading more. I just need, like, to get my hands on more. But, yeah, I enjoyed it. After that, I read 2000 AD's The Ultimate Collection of the Horned God storyline of Slaine, which is by Pat Mills, illustrated by Simon Bisley. This is 2000 AD is a compilation science fiction comic that runs in the UK. It's been running for like 50 years by now or something. It's most famous for Judge Dredd, but also Slaine is one of the other famous storylines in it. And this is particularly like a really groundbreaking one of Slaine's runs. It was one of the first ones that was in colour in the mag. It was previously all black and white, but then at the point that this was published, it was like full colour. The illustrations are not always my cup of tea, but they are, I do think they are really brilliant, like this vivid colour, the painted style, etc. Sometimes it's just with this particular, I was going to say brand, I guess it is a brand, but with this particular focus, sometimes it gets a little bit like gruesome and scary. Like, that's like a simple way of saying it, but it does sometimes get a little bit more on the gory side, which is not always my cup of tea, but it does very much work for what this story is. So this run follows Slaine as he sort of like learns about the Horned God and becomes the Horned God. It's viewed as one of the more feminist Slaine stories because it's all to do with the idea is that before this, it's all rooted in Celtic mythology. It's drawing on Celtic goddesses, and it's like this goddess that Slaine is following, and these ideas of returning to like a matriarchy that predated the patriarchy and the druids that have now come to power in this Celtic island and stuff like that. So it was really interesting. I had a fun time. Again, solid 3 out of 5 star read for me because it's not Slaine is not my favourite of the 2000 AD comics, even though I still think it's really well done for what it is. It's just, it's not the type of story which always like gets me going, like. But again, my dad keeps buying me these for special occasions because he's like giving me the backstory, because I read 2000 AD for a certain amount of time, but he's sort of introducing me to the big stories from before I started reading it. So it was really fun to explore that. The penultimate book I want to talk about is The Art of Dress, Clothes and Society, 1500 to 1914 by Jane Ashelford. This, as you might be able to tell, is a National Trust book. I got it when I was much younger, like an actual child, from a National Trust shop because I was really interested. This is a really good introduction to the art of dress. It's essentially just like a fashion history from 1500 to 1914. Because it's National Trust publishing, it's really backed up with like evidence from that the National Trust owns. So for example, for like a certain period of time, they're really drawing upon letters that are in the National Trust collection from this one particular rich family, and it's looking at like the types of clothes that they're describing in their letters to each other. Other ones is looking at like the actual clothing collections that the National Trust has from certain properties. So what it does is it looks at like, okay, what is the broader idea of what clothing and dress is like in this particular time, and then it's using all of this National Trust stuff that they own to like really back them up and be like, okay, here's looking closer, here's what this one family's dress was like during this time. So that was interesting. I thought it was, if you're someone who's interested in fashion history, if you're someone who's interested in like specifically historical fashion, I think it's a really nice jumping off point, and I think from here you could go off and read a lot further. Yeah. Finally, I'm going to end on a small run of comics. This is Batgirl DC Universe Reboot, issues 1 to 5. I've mentioned before, my friend Mark, hello Mark, sends me comics. When he's done with them, I read them. I give them to charity shops. This was just a 5-comic run exploring Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, as she travels around. She starts off, I think, in China. no, she starts off in Japan, she ends up going to Singapore, China, stuff like this. She bumps into an old friend who seems to be into some things which are a little bit dodge, and then Batgirl's trying to figure out what's going on and, like, save the day. It was perfectly fun and enjoyable. Not my favourite Batgirl story that I've read, but I haven't also read that many Batgirl stories. But perfectly enjoyable, had a good time. Again, this has been a book chat of solid 3 out of 5 star reads. Anyway, that's everything I want to talk about this week. As per usual, have you any of these? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you're having a really nice day, and I will see you next time for something different.